Okay, welcome back, everybody, from lunch. It is about 1:30 on Tuesday afternoon, December 7th. We are going to take up item 4 under department, which is the redistricting of our county commission districts. Mr. Doolin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As you know, every 10 years, the commission districts have to be redistricted following the census changes. We divided the population by 5, and it comes out to 31,686 persons per district, and so that is our target, is to make each of the districts relatively close to that in size. So if we can go to page 950, and bring you up to go back. On November 16, the board discussed 3 options and focused on option 3, and then gave staff some direction to change the district boundaries shown on this map on the screen right now. We looked at some options, and we, following the board direction on shifting some boundaries a little bit, we came up with what we're calling option 3A in the supplemental memo, which is on page 955. And it incorporates changes in between District 3 and 5 and Districts 2 and 1 and 2. And if I can go to page 958, I'll show you the changes in District 1 and 2. The 2 highlighted there is shown in teal, one by the railroad tracks, the FEC tracks, and one by San Lucie Boulevard. The numbers are so small that you can put both of them in District 2. You could switch, you put one in District 1 and the other one in District 1, either way you want to go. The percentages are so small, the actual numbers of residents that are affected can go either way, and so...
Clyde, I'll cut you off there and start. Of course, if my screen would stay on, that would be really helpful. Last time we talked about this, I think the eastern side of Commissioner Hetherington's district, she had some discussions about relative to keeping Old St. Lucie Boulevard in her district completely from A1A or East Ocean to the south, which I'm fine with. And the same thing with the triangle piece. I think when we were discussing it was really a matter of seeing if we couldn't balance out the numbers as close as we could get them. But the numbers are so minute in terms of its relevancy. I'm fine with putting those back into District 2, Commissioner Hetherington's district. So on my boundary, I'm fine with, if you took those 2 teal areas and put them in the yellow, which is Commissioner Hetherington's district, I'm fine with that. And I don't think that alters the numbers for the other districts adjacent to her at all, so.
Are we making motions on these things as we go?
No, I think we'll wrap up a motion on the total. Sorry, we'll wrap up on all the boundary, because you can't adopt one boundary without, if we're going to modify another boundary anyway. So I would just think if there's issues with other things, we'll deal with them. But for my district, I think for Stacy's, if that's all right with you, Stacy, I'm more than happy to just move those back to your district, and that's fine.
Yeah, I like option 3A as it's shown on this particular screen. Thank you.
3C?
3C.
3C as shown on the screen.
Okay, what's next, Clyde?
That's basically it. We have some other options that we generated at the direction of board members for your consideration, but we're done at this point. Yeah. Thank you. We can end staff presentation there.
Commissioners, if
Well, I think can we just review the other districts and what occurred so the public can see it? Because if you're just tuning in for the first time, they may not even know what we're doing completely.
Okay.
But every 10 years, right? Every census, we are required to redistrict our boundaries to as close as possible, right, population-wise, and to the extent that we can keep geographic normalcy and we don't have like really crazy enclaves happening. If you look at this image that's on the screen now, there is an itty-bitty little what appears to be an enclave in our district, but that's just because that's where the census tract worked out.
Correct.
And I think that might have been there before, actually, on the prior redistricting. So
That's your house.
yeah, no. So can we go to I guess Commissioner Campy's district next? If that's next on the list,
Go to 3A.
If there's anything
There
left.
you go, 3A. That's what Commissioner Campy's district looks like following November 16 direction we received.
and
The boundary
so,
follows the C-44 Canal and the St. Lucie River in separating it from District 2 and District 4.
I believe on the prior iteration, there was a very thin sliver on the north and west side of the canal.
951.
That would have been in District 4, correct? But we moved that back out of, so that was what was proposed before.
No, it would have been in 3.
Yeah, that,
Sorry.
that area shown in teal would have been in 3.
Okay.
That's what was in option 3, was showing the area as part of District 3. But your direction on November 16 moved it in District 5.
And can you
I
show
have-
that again for what that looks like close up, just so everybody understands?
Right here?
Just, what,
There it is.
You don't have a zoom in on that at all?
Yeah, you can. Just
There you go. So that took that thin sliver off the north side, west side of the canal and moved it back up into District 3.
5.
Okay, move it back.
Well, some of it, did it all go to District 5?
yes.
Okay, all right.
It just allowed the natural canal to be the boundary versus having some people on the south side of Citrus and north of the canal be in another district.
Okay,
And the canal acts as our boundary there in case we have any issues. We can pull the bridges up.
great. So, that's
And then you got the prison.
5, the prison, and the prison didn't change from what I remember seeing.
correct. The prison stayed in District 5. Moving it into District 3 would have caused a substantial imbalance in the numbers.
How many residents or trustees or whatever they're called, inmates?
1,500, it says on here.
1,600 non-voting residents. So when you look at the grand total of the 31,686, 1,600 of them are all housed in a very small area. They have no. Do we charge any tax base out of the prison? So it's just a
Not
thing.
ours.
I'm willing to accept that magnanimously.
It's very thoughtful of you.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Most people don't even realize that there's a penitentiary prison in Martin County. When I've mentioned it to people, you mean right on Willoughby? I'm like, no.
so we have what's left. There were no other changes to 2, correct? Stacy's district, it was just those 2 up in my piece that moved into hers. Nothing else changed on her southwest corner at all?
Not since the last meeting.
Okay. So the last discussion I guess we have is 4 and 3. And this is what's proposed, correct? This is your 3A?
Yes.
No,
Well, 3C,
3C, sorry.
but 3A and 3C are the same except for those 2 highlighted portions between District 1 and 2.
Okay. So Commissioner Hurd.
Yeah, the only option that I would accept for District 4 is 3B. Loblolly has always been in District 4. I've been their commissioner for 19 years. There's an awful lot of institutional relationship, and it's. I think that this moving Loblolly looks personal to me, and it looks unworthy, and I absolutely hope that 3B is the solution for District 4. That's the only fair boundary for District 4.
Okay, Clyde, so just so we understand, what are we looking at now? This is which option?
This is 3B. Can you zoom in on the lower one, please, Sam? And what we did in 3B was moved Loblolly Pines, which is this peninsula you see highlighted in teal, into District 4. And we moved a portion of Heritage Ridge, which you see also in teal, into District 3 so that we could bring something of a balance to the numbers between 3 and 4.
And which option is this?
This is option 3B.
3B.
Where's Loblolly on here?
And T.
Loblolly Pines is the area, is the blue with a teal outline that looks like a peninsula?
This long one right here?
Yes.
So is,
That's-
this area is shifted to District 4?
No, it's always been in District 4.
Okay, so I'm just reading what it says here. So what is the version?
For some reason that I can't explain, this time someone made a recommendation that District 4 lose Loblolly after always being in District 4, and instead it was shifted to District 3. And that's,
And what version is that? Just that teal would go green?
So you have a,
3C.
you have a three, can you show that? Can you show that?
Option 3,
C?
you mean 3B.
That was 3B, I thought you just told us.
yeah, 3C,
That's 3C.
which doesn't include,
Yes.
that doesn't include Loblolly.
Right. Option 3C leaves Loblolly in District 3.
Well, it moves Loblolly into District 3. Loblolly is in District 4, always has been.
Well, I mean,
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
sorry,
stop.
I didn't see a light.
Commissioner Jenkins?
The residents of Loblolly, I know for a fact, I have relationships with them also, feel that they live in Hope Sound. And that having that tongue go down there just doesn't make logical sense. You've got to drive out of District 4 into District 3 to access District 4. That doesn't make any sense. I've got the Greenway project that's starting on the north side of Loblolly that's coming down, potentially, the study's going on right now, coming down through Gomez. That's a contiguous project that encompasses that area. It's a nice, straight, clean line where you can actually know logically where a district starts and stops. I've always been perplexed on how, well, I know how it happened, but that whole corner there of the county and how the districts, both districts, wiggled around, it just didn't make any sense. So this is logical. I mean, it's one community. I mean, we all represent the whole county. It's me representing across the street and on the other side of Loblolly Pines. Again, doesn't make any sense. I like this map here, and
Well, when you say this map, Commissioner, you don't mean what's
see.
on the screen, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So again, Clyde, just so I can keep track a little bit, this is 3C we're looking at?
Yes.
No. Yes.
Yes.
The image that's up on the screen
Right now.
is 3C.
So that's taking Loblolly away from District 4.
I'm just trying to understand the different images, so if somebody makes a motion at some point, it'll be clear what we're voting on. So 3C is what's showing now,
Yes.
but the only modification to 3C would be moving those two teal pieces from my district into Stacy's district.
And moving Loblolly into,
No, that is 3C what we're looking at.
yes, sir.
Yes, it is.
On the screen, what you have on the screen is moving your two pieces that into state, leaving those in District 2 with Commissioner Heatherington, and then moving Loblolly into District 3.
So can I clarify?
Can I just stop? So the image on the screen is 3C.
Correct.
The only change to 3C are the two teal areas from District 1 into District 2.
That's the difference between 3A and 3C.
Right, but the screen we're looking at is 3C.
Yes.
Okay, there is a different screen that has Loblolly in District 4, which is Sarah's district. That's not on the screen currently.
Correct.
Okay. So if a motion gets made, whatever motion gets made, if it's to leave it as the screen that we see, the motion would be item 3C less the two teal nuggets, if you will, up in District 1 and District 2.
No, item 3C has both of those two teal nuggets in District 2,
Why
they're doesn't-
highlighted, I don't
You're
know.
just highlighting.
just to show that that's...
Oh, okay, because I can't see that, because all you can see is teal. So those 3C has them in already.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Item 3B, right, is Loblolly in District 4, not in District 3.
Correct.
And that's what's shown on the screen now.
Yes.
And if someone were to make a motion for this, are the two nuggets up in District 1 still in 3B in District 2?
No, they're independent of each other.
Okay, so if we made,
That's why I wanted to make
so,
motions as we went.
so,
Sam, pan up to the bigger one. See, there's C. Well, you can't,
you can't see it.
This
That's
is 3B.
3B.
All right, so again, if a motion gets made, no matter what, the only really substantive change is the difference between Loblolly being in District 3 or being in District 4. Right?
Right.
There's more changes than that because there's 3 and 5 changes.
You're referring to the canal, Commissioner? That's incorporated into
3A.
3A, 3B, and
So no
3C.
matter what, that crosses over.
That's in all three.
Okay.
Okay. Ed, I think you were next.
Commissioner Hurd, you want to go first?
Sure. Commissioner Jenkins, isn't having all of Jupiter Island enough? This looks to me like a personal and political steal. I move 3B.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for 3B, and 3B, as discussed earlier, would include Loblolly in District 4, not in District 3. The canal changes are already reflected in the map that would be in District 5, and District 1 and 2 would represent those two teal areas that go into District 2. That would be item B.
Commissioners, just let me, so what, today is not the final action, that takes place next week. You are recommending to staff that then those, whatever your decision, whatever what your determination today, be moved forward so the legal descriptions can be completed and your final action will take place on the 14th.
Right. Got it.
Okay.
Now you can go.
When I first heard about this, well, let me back up to the last time this happened. Give a quick history. 3 and 5 split Indiantown on 710 on Warfield Boulevard. Originally, it was Mike DiTerlizzi and Lee Weberman that I got involved in knowing what these districts were. And then when I took I was elected to District 5 and Patrick Hayes was elected to District 3. And we had one of these situations come up, and the districts were split. When it split on Warfield, he and I both felt that we represented Indiantown, because that's the heart of the community, and it's split pretty evenly, and we both felt that obviously everyone represents everywhere, but if we talk about it, I always brag on Palm City. It's more meant for humor and light to lighten things up, but officially that's split, and I lost the full village of Indiantown. If you look at the original version that you showed, that you started with now, I lost the heart of the village of Indiantown. And when I came back into office, I remember saying, well, I still am in Indiantown, but I don't have any of the real people. I have all of the property north of it. Harold and I, Commissioner Jenkins and I, have had some back and forth about Timer Powers Park, because originally it was in District 5, and I spearheaded putting the canopy over the rodeo ring because it was such a big issue. And I took a lot of pride in ownership, if you will, figurative ownership of Timer Powers Park. And then not that long ago, I realized it's actually not in District 5 anymore. I had given it up, if you will. Then we sat down recently, and staff can attest to this. We sat in a conference room upstairs, and you showed me your versions of what you thought would work by using a computerized program, who doesn't know any of us, and also using the census maps. What do they call them? Blocks? Census blocks? Which were, like I was telling people when I was describing this in the last couple of weeks, like puzzle pieces almost. They don't have a logical shape to them. They don't really take into consideration neighborhoods and geographic. They're just sort of random, and they come down from Washington, D.C., I would assume. And I pushed back a little bit, not only in my own District 5, I was looking at, as I assumed the 5 of us did, does it make sense everywhere? And then I started to realize, can you go to the original version of what it currently looks like, what the county looks like now by districts? To also remind folks that might be paying attention at home, we don't do it based on acreage, we do it based on population. So this is how it is currently. And if you look at 3 and 5, they're gigantic based on acreage because not a lot of people live in these western areas. Now, we don't have the ability to split screen that, but if you look at that line that's to the left of the number 5, you see a little right there, that's Allapattah. That full purple section to the left, all of the Martin Grade, which I was instrumental in having be named a scenic highway to avoid any kind of construction along that, sort of a highlight in Martin County. All of Indiantown, now not just the village, the actual heart of Indiantown, I'm giving it all up. So that whole left section, friends and neighbors and all sorts of projects and things that I worked on, and I wasn't interested in giving it up. And we kidded a little bit about the prison, but by keeping the prison, I keep 1,600 people, which really affects. Now, if I wanted to play hardball, I could start really picking this thing apart and saying, well, I only want half the prison. Then I give back 800 people, and I could start to get some extra. But I realized if all 5 of us do that, if we take it to that level of personal, we'll be here till the spring. Because I could dig my heels in and say, I don't want to give up the sections that I have. I know people that live there. I feel like I represent them, and we all represent them. But there is a little sense of home team. And I just went to Miss Lovelady and Mr. Doolin. I said, I get it. I'm not going to be one of those people. I'm just going to take it the way it is. And then I started to think, what's logical? Now, that little sliver that we discussed along Citrus and the canal, in my mind, was not logical to have one side of the street north of the canal be in a different district. And I have a unique perspective with this, as does Miss Lovelady, is I chair the school district's version of this meeting. It's called the Boundary Advisory Committee. And we met several times, and what we did is we tried to avoid and eliminate enclaves. We spent it's a group of citizens representing all 5 school board members, and then there was a handful of others, so it was probably a dozen or 15 people. And we just looked at enclaves. Now, if I didn't know my colleagues up here, and I didn't know Lob Lolly from A Hole in the Wall, or some of these other little weird triangles and enclaves, that blue line that comes down into the green line it creates enclaves. It doesn't create natural, logical boundaries that neighbors would be like, I'm in this district or I'm in that district. Now, obviously, there's a fight between, a disagreement. Hopefully it doesn't turn into a fight between 2 districts. And people can take that from what it is. When you go back to that version where that sliver, that finger, if you will, comes all the way down, that creates an enclave. It creates a situation along the coast. And then, to me, that just doesn't make sense. Now, Lob Lolly or not Lob Lolly, I mean, I gave up big portions of people and communities that I would like to have held on to. We have not rebuilt the VFW Hall in Indiantown. I was a big proponent in assisting them. I had to speak to them recently when they asked if I would continue my assistance, and I said, it's no longer in my district. Because that's just what we're supposed to be doing. We don't officially own any of these areas. They belong to everyone. So if staff is saying that this makes sense and it looks logical, if we just took this and handed it out to people and said which one of these is the most logical options, that's not it. And I apologize to Commissioner Hurd that that is loblolly for some reason. That's not in the best interest of trying to redistrict these. And I've given up plenty in the process.
Commissioner
So
Heatherington.
I'm in favor of 3C, which would make it more logical. And I apologize to Commissioner Hurd that she would lose a neighborhood, but take it from me, who's lost towns and huge chunks of friends and colleagues and constituents. It is what it is.
Commissioner Heatherington.
I think you just said a lot of what I had to say, and I would just say it seems illogical, and particularly splitting Gomez Avenue there and having residents on each side of the street having different commissioners. It doesn't seem logical. So I won't repeat everything you just said, but I agree.
Thank you. Commissioner Jenkins.
I'm just going to say, accusing me of some political motivation, that I'm not going to take that. For one, I'm not smart enough to play politics, so just as simple as that. These lines are put here to make it easy for a commissioner to represent their community. Having a straight line there does exactly that. So I don't know if you've got some political thing going on with Loblolly Pines, please continue. I'm all about doing my job in representing that community, whether it be sidewalks and roads and stop signs and you name it, I do it. So I got no interest in having a political conversation about a district line. That we're elected countywide. I just don't get that part, nor do I care at this point. So
Okay, so there's been a lot of discussion, and I think everybody has aired their opinions. Commissioner Hurd has a motion on the floor that does not have a second. Would anybody else care to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to accept 3C, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Item 3C. Anybody care to second that?
Can you just recap just for 3C is?
So 3C would
Go back to
Go back
3C.
to
Would
3C.
be, the image on the screen that you see is item 3C.
These are.
And
yeah.
again, those two nodules, let's call them that, are on this image, they are in the boundaries of District 2. It just appears,
Canal is appropriate.
and the canal has been moved back to the canal, so all of the northwest side of the canal goes back into District 5. And this is for the purposes of directing staff and our legal description folks for next week, apparently to give them some time to get these boundaries officially delineated, and that's what we will be voting on for its final adoption next week. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
So that is what the motion is.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, this is, well, it's not really a public hearing, but it is certainly a public comment. Anybody in the audience wish to comment on the proposed boundaries for the 2020 census data redo for our boundaries? Seeing none in the audience, back to the board. We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Hurd dissenting. Okay.
Thank you, members of the board.
Staff, thank you for your work, and we'll see this item back on the 14th, correct?
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Public Works, Department 5, Traffic Safety Planning Update. Mr. Lambert. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, members of the board. So this is our traffic safety project planning update. First, I wanted to say thank you earlier for highlighting some safety aspects earlier in your commissioner priorities. Commissioner Heatherington brought up one. We've had a lot of discussions in her district, and Commissioner Campy, I know we've had a couple in your district as well. So the graphic on the screen is Vision Zero. This is this correlation between speeds and fatalities. And Vision Zero is kind of one of those hot topic words. The Federal Highway Administration and the Florida Department of Transportation have adopted this vision to get towards zero fatalities in our transportation network. The Martin MPO is working on their Vision Zero action plan, and this graphic kind of hits home with some of the stuff that we do here, obviously, you know, being the area that we are. So every 2 years, the Public Works Department goes through and they do a crash surveillance report. So the graphic here is a subset of that data, and we're looking at crashes that have occurred in the subject range between July 1st, 2018, September 30th, 2020. These are injuries that have occurred on roadways with speed limits less than or equal to 30 miles an hour. So just there's a count on here. There are less than 200 crashes that occurred, and we could dive into any of these. But we wanted to show the inverse of that. You know, these are the crashes that have occurred on our network where speeds are greater than or equal to 35. So the main difference between those two graphics is, you know, there's a handful of injury crashes, and on this map, once you get above, you see that correlation of the speed, you know, relating to fatalities, and you have those red dots pop up on here. So just to kind of bring it home, this is the map from the crash surveillance report that's published. There are over 8,000 crashes that occurred during this segment of time. There were 44 fatalities that occurred. There were over 2,000 injury crashes, and the remainder of them are what we call property damage only crashes, so small fender benders for the most part. So what do we do with all this data? These reports, we highlight high severity intersections and roadway segments. And so just shown are the two covers of the different crash surveillance reports that we've published. We identify these key locations and we try to focus in on them, try to do projects that kind of hit home there. So the ones that stand out on this graphic are Southwest Kenner Highway at Cove Road. We've done some improvements there most recently. They were discussed earlier. Federal Highway Heritage Ridge is one. Cove Road is the one that kind of pops up to my mind. There are two intersections identified in this map, and you can see when you look at the non-motorized analysis locations, the graphic on the right-hand side, Cove Road's on there as well at US 1, and that 44th Street pops up again. So then we dial down to, you know, those projects, and we wanted to highlight some of these traffic safety elements that we go through on all these projects. So these are some considerations that we all think, you know, we hear the term traffic safety, we think of roadways. I mean, really it's street safety. So we're thinking about non-motorists, bicyclists, and then the motorists last, all these services that we're providing. So some of the safety elements that are on the screen here that are important that come to mind are lighting, sight distance. So we just did our ribbon cutting for Bridge Road. Luckily, sight distance is not an issue there. However, on Map Road, there's a lot of landscaping in the interior, and we've had to do some adjustments to those plans. Speed management is the number one thing that I think we hear of in the Public Works Department, and we've just bulleted some items that are useful tools to kind of to curb that. So deflection, creating enclosure, creating motorist engagement, and then perceptions. Those are the big things from the speed management aspect. And then traffic control is the other big one. The Traffic Engineering Division is responsible for maintaining all of our traffic signals. We have over 16,000 traffic control signs in Martin County, and street lighting is the other, you know, the big component. So this is just some graphics of sight distance, like we discussed earlier. Landscaping is a big thing. So we wanted to get into this, showing you kind of what enclosure means. So this is a graphic on the left of what a rural street looked like, and then what it could be if you move up to the top right corner. So you're creating friction by, you know, adding in those crosswalks. You're visually identifying, hey, this is a realm where pedestrians should be, you know, identified, and you're gonna expect them. And then going further, that's kind of the scene that we're getting in our Bridge Road Town Center and our Map Road Town Center projects. So we can't achieve this everywhere. There's just not the compatible land uses to have this in all of our neighborhoods and all of our districts. But these are some of the techniques that can help bring down that speed to a manageable level to kind of remove those fatalities from the equation. So getting back to some complete streets topics, Dixie Highway and Golden Gate. We're out there right now working. This is taken from this Complete Streets Access to Transit study that the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council put on. And the cross section that you see here is what they proposed, and it's very close to what we have going out being built currently. So a lot of these projects take time to be implemented fully to all of these visions. You know, our transit system is still kind of in its infancy. We're trying to build up that ridership. So this graphic also shows these green bike lanes. We're adding bike lanes to the corridor. And getting to Cove Road, which was one of those corridors that we identified where there are a lot of crashes. This is a sample of what could be on Cove Road between Dixie Highway and US 1. So these are two instances of where the Traffic Engineering Division was able to respond quickly to some of this data that we've received. So the graphic on the right is at the intersection of Southwest 96th Street and Citrus Boulevard. There were some crashes that occurred where motorists failed to stop at the intersection. They drove through the intersection into the woods. It's a T intersection. So rumble strips have been one of those things that we've done as a mitigation tool. We also added a flashing beacon on the stop sign to help bring awareness. There have not been any crashes at this location in over 500 days since we've done some of these things. So getting back to the data. On the right here, we have the Martin Grade. So as early as this year, there was a fatality that occurred on Martin Grade, and we decided to use some of our traffic safety funds to put in edgeline rumble strips. So that's that sound that you heard. It's that audible and vibratory feedback that you get. I mean, these are a couple of quick projects that we were able to do and definitely have shown results. Oops, sorry. So we've received feedback from the board and from the residents, and what are we going to do in the future? We've gone to, a lot of town hall meetings with each of you individually. We're getting into the neighborhood and restoration stakeholder meetings more and more. The Traffic Engineering Division is. We have one tomorrow night for the Corwin Gardens neighborhood. And participation with the Office of Community Development meetings, those NAC meetings and CRA board meetings. And, we wanted to highlight that we continue to coordinate with law enforcement. They're the agency that we really, have out on the field, in the field, giving us that daily feedback of where they're seeing some issues and where some of our data can help them out for their targeted enforcement. And then relying on our request for service system, that's where we get a lot of feedback from all of our residents. And one of the big things that I would like to highlight is, conducting those field reviews and walking audits. I mean, I haven't had the chance to get out with, with everyone individually, but those are really important during project design, highlighting issues for construction in the field, doing those walking audits, finding out where people are coming and going to, and getting that resident feedback too. So with that, we just wanted to say, thank you, answer any questions, and I think for this item, the recommended action is to just accept the information as presented.
Commissioner Campy. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. We've had plenty of opportunities to meet with you, myself, and Ms. Wixer, and I appreciate what we've accomplished. I don't think there is a destination in this topic. I think it's going to constantly evolve. In the last year or so, we were able to, with your assistance in multiple departments, to get a traffic light onto Murphy. That's been a tricky one in Palm City for a long, long time. Tragically, you'll be adding a new dot to your map. There was a fatality, motorcycle accident fatality there in the last couple of days. Son of a dear friend of mine, someone very, very important in Palm City. He leaves behind twin 12-year-olds. So, I mean, this is a very, very serious issue. Obviously, I think when you hear me talk about the sheriff's office or fire rescue, I always say that the first dollar of people's taxes they want for safety. Now, we're thinking safety like what the sheriff's office would supply and what fire rescue would bring. But I think we could join right in with that, traffic safety. We can all sit and tell stories about the crazy things that we see. And sometimes it even borders on where people are making jokes and it's humorous. Oh, I see these people, they're driving on the sidewalk. Well, I mean, what I have been seeing, I count this as one of the most important things, and I didn't put it on my list of priorities because I'm sure it's the 5 of ours most important. It's county-wide, so I couldn't just narrow it down. So I had an opportunity to visit a family yesterday that was right in Dyer Point Road. And young family, they have a 2-year-old, the wife is pregnant. She can't even cross her residential street with her 2-year-old in a stroller, and she's pregnant, just to get to the other side of the road where the sidewalk is. Because on their side of the street, it's grass right to the road. So people won't even slow down as she's in her driveway trying to cross a residential street with a stroller, and they will fly by. We've done the studies there. So they asked me to come, and we stood outside for 15, 20 minutes. Now, it was about 6 o'clock at night, so it was already dark. And people are racing like it's 95. And I know that we've done actual studies and seen the statistics there. But sometimes it's not a matter of that. And they were concerned because I'll give the update now. We had done, as Commissioner Hurd had done, one of those ballots. You guys did it. Sent out a ballot and to find out if the neighbors that would be affected would be in agreement for a speed table. And Luke, why don't you tell us how the results came in?
It was a tie. It was definitely a shock to come from the clerk's office that it was a tie. The supervisor of election, excuse me.
129 people for, 129 people against. So that puts staff and myself in a tricky spot because, then what? Half the population wanted it. So, I have almost turned it into a slogan, a very serious slogan in my mind, that safety trumps convenience. So I get that people don't want speed tables, stop signs, traffic lights, traffic calming, but those are the people that are the most angry and annoyed by it. Not in every case, but I would assume a lot of them are the people that are speeding in their own neighborhoods. I live in a 1-mile loop of houses, and it's gated. And so a majority of the people either are residents or visiting residents, and they pass my house, they got to be doing 40 or 50 miles an hour in a 20. And, we always say, oh, well, we're hopeful that no one gets killed, but people do. So I think we need to, as much as we are supportive of the sheriff's office and anti-crime issues and hashtag hashtag wrong exit, and all of the training and equipment and capital and facilities and personnel we've done for fire rescue, multi-millions of dollars in both of those categories, I think we should have that same level of commitment to this. And, we're talking about resiliency, we talk, like coastal, sea level rising, resiliency, we talk about septic to sewer, and all of these other issues, we do not give, not that we don't give any, and I'm not trying to say that we're lacking. I just think we need to elevate it for 2022. It should be the year. Now, there's nothing you can do. Everyone says, well, put the sheriff out there, put more deputies out on the street and just write a ton of tickets. That only works when a deputy's physically there. I mean, how many of you have been in a school zone and watched people do 40 or 50 miles an hour through a 20-mile-an-hour school zone, students and crossing guards present? So I plan on using this bully pulpit and your help, because we are very fortunate to have the two of you and everybody that you two represent across all of the departments. I'm going to use 2022 as a year to just continually push for those things, not just in my own district and in my own neighborhoods, but for everybody's. If South River needs to have a traffic light because it will make them safer, I sit on the MPO with the majority of the board here, and FDOT says, oh, don't worry about it, we're going to get it, we're going to study it, and we're going to put them. They're talking about even if we get everything perfect, Ms. Wixer, when would the soonest they would put that traffic light in?
Probably 6 years.
6 years! I'm talking about in 2022. I think we need to figure out funding and financing and the wherewithal to get those things done. Because 6 years, and I'm not mad at Miss Wixer for that. She's being honest. That's the way the system works. It's so bureaucratic. Out on in Indiantown, what's the road Tommy Clemens? Those folks have been begging us for help, and the MPO and our staff and even the FDOT, we've put flags and signs with flags and all that other stuff. We can't wait. So I think whatever we need to do to make this, you're giving us an update, and I appreciate it. But it needs to be more than an update. I can address some of the smaller issues with this elevated crosswalk here and there. We talked about the blinking, speed limit 35, you're doing 40, or stop signs. But I think the public needs to know that the five of us and the government that we represent are not going to stand for it anymore. As much as we're giving kudos around the state for how we've put our septic to sewer programs in place with out-of-the-box thinking and really unique thinking, we have to do. I want Martin County to be known as the county that is leading the charge against this stuff. And the only way to do it, because people will speed and go through red lights, stop signs, school zones, is stringent enforcement and then stop signs and red lights, so that if they are there and someone goes through a stop sign or goes through a red light, that there's consequences for it. And that's the end of my speech, sir.
Luke, you have nothing else?
Just I could answer any questions if there are.
Commissioners,
There's a
anybody
lot
else
of
have
backup in
anything
the
else
body.
in this? So, one thing I would suggest that, relative to Ed's comments, that we can do, I have, that I represent the Association of Counties on the Long Range Transportation Committee for the state. And I talk about this all the time because Lisa, Luke, all of our engineers, everybody that's involved in traffic, you all have rules you have to play by. And there are books, there are reference points, and there are certain things we want to do that when we go to ask for them, we're told you can't do this because this or that or whatever. And I'm not blaming either one of you or that's the way it is. But what I find most interesting about all of this is this zero tolerance, campaign that Federal Highway has and FDOT has. The only way to get to significantly different numbers is that there has to be a way for elected bodies that are in the decision-making role of doing something out of the box that doesn't fit the Green Book or doesn't follow some other rulemaking. I keep saying to them, you've got to give us the ability to step out of the box and say, fair enough, we appreciate that, but on this issue, we understand our local conditions more than anybody else will ever understand them, and we as the board are willing to do that. And so, I think a piece of this is just constantly communicating with FDOT. If zero tolerance is the goal, then you have to give us better tools to work with than what you give us to work with. Because all of us could cite 5, 6, 10, 20 examples in our districts that, the conditions are untenable. Things have changed. Society has changed. People's migration habits have changed. There's all sorts of reasons for it. But at the end of the day, if somebody is killed on one of those red dots on your map, was there something we could have done to prevent it, to make it better? And in probably most cases, yes, I'm guessing. Not blaming you guys or anything. I'm just saying in a lot of cases, and to Ed's point again, the issue of 6 years to get something done is also not reasonable. So, I plan to keep on communicating that message to FDOT in my meetings, but I think at some point we need to ramp that up and communicate in a stronger voice from our commission to FDOT that you got to give us some more tools to work with than what you're currently giving us. Commissioner Hetherington.
Just jumping on to that point real quick. When they presented the Vision Zero at our MPO, back to your comments, Commissioner Smith, it seems as an unattainable goal when we're sitting here saying that we need this traffic light for safety reasons. We don't want to wait for a fatality. We want the traffic light in front of South River, because if you stand out there every day, regardless of the counts, the analytics, there needs to be a traffic light. And sitting with Jerry O'Reilly a couple years ago, he intimated that if it's a safety concern, then FDOT would get it done, and they would get it done. They would find the money and they would get it done in a timely fashion. So, which is why we keep harping on that. At the last MPO meeting, what was the gentleman's name that also presented? In addition, Jerry O'Reilly, we asked for a flashing steep bron, a sign that indicates that there's a right-hand turn coming up because there is no turning lane. And even though that is in the work plan, so for the time being, can we have a flashing sign going, I guess it'd be going south into South River? And he said, that seems like a good idea. Now, when we follow up, they said, well, we're going to wait for the analytics from January. That to me is an unacceptable answer. It's a sign that we as a board should be pushing and asking for. Simply, we're requesting a sign. Doesn't require, a lot of studies, and it certainly doesn't require a lot of funding. So those are the things I think we have to be very vocal continuously about just reiterating your point.
Okay, anybody else? Luke, thank you very much. Lisa, thank you very much. We will keep plugging along. Next item on the agenda is Department 6. Mr. Mail, I assume you're back there somewhere. There he is. Update on the development of the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual LOSUM. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair, Board. Thanks for having me. I'm John Mail, the Ecosystem Restoration and Management Manager, and this item is intended to be an update for the board on the development of the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual. But before I get started, if you would indulge me a minute, it seems like an appropriate time to acknowledge the heroic effort of the team that worked for the county in this capacity. I've worked for government for almost 26 years, and I can say comfortably that this team demonstrated a competency, professionalism, and a commitment that exceeds anything I've ever been a part of. The people that worked on this team each contributed uniquely in a way that made them indispensable. There was no duplications, which oftentimes led to heated discussions about the best way to move forward. Everyone was duly committed to a single purpose and objective, and nobody really took a day off in the last 3 years. It was 3 years ago this month that 25 people crammed into a room upstairs to talk about what we need to do to represent the county's interests on this process. And several of those folks unwavered to this day. And I'd love to recognize them. First of all, the leader of the team, Jim Gordon, our Public Works Director, from our legal office, Ruth Holmes, who very capably kept us on point and maintained the integrity of our arguments, also while tugging at our leashes as we engaged in these public engagement processes. And maybe the reason she has a harness on her arm. We pulled very hard on those leashes at times, but she did an extremely good job of keeping the integrity of our arguments in place. And then the technical expertise provided by people like Kathy Fitzpatrick and Diane Hughes and Katie Bowes, who we hired in the midst of this process and now has gone on to other things. Apparently, the experience made her marketable other places. And then the team of consultants that we hired, I wouldn't have wanted to do it without any one of them. And oftentimes we were the only stakeholder able to look behind the curtain that the Corps of Engineers had. And we were able to see things other stakeholders weren't. We were able to make arguments that other stakeholders weren't because of the expertise that our consultants brought to the table. And so many others played roles along the way, too many to list, but I'd be remiss not to also acknowledge the board's unwavering commitment to this and providing the resources and giving us the support to get the result that we did. So with that, I'll actually get to the update. Am I running the slideshow?
Apparently you are.
So this first slide I wanted to put up as a way to take you back to where we started from. This is what probably best illustrates our current schedule. It's one of about 87 pages that the water managers use to make decisions from 2008 to today and for the rest of 2022 on how to manage Lake Okeechobee for South Florida and for its varied interests. I want to point out just a few things about it. First of all, it's very complicated. It doesn't require much argument to make that point. But if you look on the left side, each of these boxes represents a lake stage envelope. There's 5 of them on this chart, and then there's 2 additional lake stage envelopes below this in the beneficial use zone and the water shortage management band, where they don't release water, and so it's not on this chart here. But I wanted to point out there's 5 of those, and then there's this metric of decisions that lead to a result on the right-hand side. And you'll notice on the right-hand side, every single one of those decision points results in a discharge volume of some sort to the St. Lucie River. So to compare that, we'll look at the next one in a second, but I want to point out a couple other things. This schedule was modeled in the LOSUM process to simulate over a 52-year period of how it performs for us. And on an average annual basis, this schedule that we currently operate under would produce 230,000 acre feet of discharge of lake water. So remember that point. I know numbers are difficult after lunch. Apologize for that, but we'll get to the next schedule. The other thing I think that's probably easier to wrap our heads around is this is the schedule that produced the summers of 2013, 2016, and 2018. So the schedule that the Corps of Engineers selected as its preferred alternative is illustrated in this chart here. I'm going to make a few observations about it. I'm not going to explain the whole thing to you. Nobody wants that. First of all, there's really only 3 zones. There's Zone A, which is the high lake management band. So this is when the lake gets over 16.5 feet here on June 1st, or up to a little over 17 feet in the dry season. When we're at this level, it's discharge in every direction as much as possible. For us, that may mean 4,000 to 5,000 CFS. It depends on tides. It depends on local rainfall. A lot of factors come into play in determining how much water can be discharged in Zone A, so that's why it's maximum practicable. In the period of record, when this was modeled for performance, over a 52-year period, we spent 1% of that period of record in this zone. So 99% of the time we were in a zone lower than Zone A in the preferred plan that was selected. The zone just below that, this narrow zone between blue and red, that's the combination of 2 zones in our current schedule, Zone B and C. We get up to 3,500 CFS at the S80, which is the St. Lucie Locks at Phipps Park. So that's water that actually gets into the St. Lucie River in that zone under this schedule. We're in that zone for 3.7% of the time. So another pretty small period during the period of record in modeling. And the fact is we very seldom will be able to get 3,500 when we're in that zone for several factors. Typically, when we'd be in this zone in the period of record, it would be during king tides. And those tides hold back water in the St. Lucie River so that you stack water up when you release it at the St. Lucie Lock and Dam. And you can flood out some communities in Palm City, and the Corps is not allowed to do that. And so they'll have to meter that to not exceed those volumes. The other thing is these are S80 releases, and so it's also going to include local basin runoff. So whatever's coming in from the C44 basin or Western Martin County would be subtracted from this to determine how much lake water actually comes to the St. Lucie River. So it'll very rarely be 3,500, even in that 3.7% of the time in the period of record. But the model doesn't make that distinguishment. The model assumes if we're in that zone, we're discharging that amount, and it kicks out that kind of performance. My point in saying that, or belaboring that point, is that when we get to model performance for this plan, it's a worst case scenario. Any discretion that's employed by water managers or any attenuating circumstances is going to reduce that total performance measure. So the next feature I want to point out that's probably the most significant change is Zone D. That's this entire area between the blue and purple line. This is probably the most dramatic difference in this schedule from other schedules that the Corps use for the lake. It's very broad. It gives the Corps tremendous flexibility in managing the lake for given circumstances. But what's most important to us is if you look on the right-hand side, in Zone D, there's 0 cubic feet per second going to the S80. That's not 0 lake water, that's 0 water coming to the St. Lucie River. So that's a pretty dramatic change from what we have been experiencing. That zone is, and the zone below it, which we also would not have any discharges, makes up 95.3% of the period of record for the 52-year period that was modeled. So 95% of the time, there would be 0 lake water coming to the St. Lucie River over that 52-year period of record, if that were the schedule used during that time period. Going forward, of course, it's hard to forecast that, but that's what we look back on. That's how we compare that to other plans. So substantial improvement in that regard. Zone D makes up 77% of the time. Again, 0 releases to the St. Lucie River. Some of these other lines, these gray lines in here, really distinguish what happens to the Caloosahatchee, and isn't terribly important to us, but does make a difference in terms of how much water stays in the lake in the dry season. I'll touch on that in a little bit, but I don't want to go into too much detail on it. A couple other things about how this schedule performs for the St. Lucie River. It's about a 57% reduction in lake water to the C44 basin. It's important to make that distinction that it's lake water to the basin rather than water to the St. Lucie River, because a lot of things happen between Port Mayaca and the St. Lucie Lock. For instance, there's 27 different pump stations that draw water for irrigation in western Martin County. There's the C44 reservoir, which several of you saw the pumps turn on for last week. That has the capacity to store and treat 60,000 acre feet of water. So there's evapotranspiration that happens. There's Calkins Water Farm. There's seepage that happens and water table recharge. So a lot of things happen between those two locks. So when we say there's 57% reduction in lake water, that's lake water getting into that system that does all kinds of different things before any of it goes out the St. Lucie River. Another way to look at this is the number of days of discharges. The plan that's been selected has 34% fewer days of discharges at the S80, so that's water that actually goes into the St. Lucie River, 34% fewer days than our current conditions. This is one of the factors that was also an improvement over Plan CC, which was the tentatively selected schedule. Back in August, we were all more excited about, and then in optimization, we had some lament over how it was optimized because it seemed to get worse. With the exception of this metric, this plan has 14% fewer discharge days than Plan CC did. So if you're still with me, some of you are thinking, well, then there must be more water in those days. That's the effect of having this large D zone with no discharges to us, and then they've moved these Zone B and Zone A's up a little bit, so the lake gets higher, you're going to get more water when you do get water. That's just one of the effects of this plan. Another way to talk about this schedule.
And John, just one point.
Certainly.
In the presentation at the 16 County Coalition, that was 6 inches, right? That was the difference between
Zone
prior
BC
model.
moved up 6 inches on June 1st. Zone A moved up an entire foot.
Okay.
And that's a foot of lake water, so that's 457,000 acre feet. It's a lot of water. When even an inch makes a big difference. Another way to talk about this, like I said, with the last plan it gave us the summers of 2013, 16, and 18. The period of record that was modeled for evaluating these plans ended in 2015. So we don't have 16 and 18, but we know from the modeling that we would not have had the lost summer of 2013 with this schedule. And we can extrapolate from this schedule into 2016 and 18 and be reasonably assured there would have not been a lost summer of 2016 or 2018 with this plan. And I'm hesitant to say it. I don't know what this is made out of for sure. We may be done with lost summers with this schedule. I'm fairly comfortable saying that, particularly as they consider some operational guidance that includes a blue-green algae metric that if there's algae in the lake, they wouldn't discharge it between the months of June, July, and August. They're modeling that right now. That's actually, I think, getting into my next slide. Over the next month, they'll be taking this schedule that they've selected, and they'll be looking at how it performs with some different guidance tools that could be added on to the schedule that would suggest if, how could we vary our schedule based on algae being in the lake, or how could we adjust the schedule if we're forecasting a severe drought, or how could we make adjustments to our operations if we've had significant ecological impacts to one part of the system. So that's the phase we're in right now. And starting with the harmful algal bloom operational guidance, they're modeling how this plan would perform if you restricted flows to the estuaries June, July, and August. What effect does that have in the dry season? How much does it change the total? How much does it change water supply, navigation, recreation, all those elements? The other thing that they're looking at, like I mentioned, was the conservation mode. That actually was baked into this schedule. It's a mode that uses forecasting and lake stage to reduce beneficial flows to the Caloosahatchee and south to the Everglades in the dry season. The plan as it is actually has that built into it. So what they did was modeled what would happen if you took that out. And there's a lot of numbers here. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it, but if you look at this column here, this is the flows to the St. Lucie estuary from Lake Okeechobee. This is kind of the performance measure we use to evaluate plans throughout the process. With the current schedule, it's 117,000 acre feet on an average annual basis. If you remove the conservation mode, or if you don't allow flows to the Caloosahatchee in the dry season, or the next one is if you don't allow it to the Caloosahatchee or south during the dry season, how does that change things? For us, I'm not sure I said that quite right, but basically, the conservation mode's in there. If they took it out, it improves things for us slightly, about 10%, if you allow flows west and south all the way to the water shortage management band. But what it does, if you notice here, this is the problem the Corps will highlight, is you have a much higher incident of duration and severity of water supply cutbacks, particularly with Lake Okeechobee service area duration. If you allow flows south and west through the duration of the lake stage, you get to 71, and the existing conditions is 59. That's events, or 2-week averages, and so that would be a problem for the Corps. We tend to disagree with that. We think there's opportunities for the Corps to reevaluate how water supply performance is measured, but nonetheless, they've told us that's kind of a deal breaker. It is possible that they could use the schedule that restricts water to the west in lower stages of D, but when you restrict it south, you start to create some water supply problems. We will get the results of the Corps' analysis on that in January. And then the last thing they were looking at was that I mentioned the ecosystem recovery modes. The problem they run into there is that it's a push and pull. So if you have impacted lake, year after year, and they want to try to lower the lake to recover, well, then that impacts another ecosystem. And so when you're trying to balance ecosystem impacts, you end up just robbing Peter to pay Paul, and that's one they don't seem to be talking about much anymore. We think that one's probably not going to make it into operational guidance, but again, we'll find that out in January. So what's next? After they finish the operational guidance in the next month or so, they'll begin drafting the environmental impact statement. The National Environmental Protection Act requires that an EIS be drafted to consider to qualify and quantify the impacts to these factors. Your team will be highly engaged in reviewing that draft, making sure that they appropriately identify impacts to Martin County's interests with this plan. After that draft is done, there'll be a period where we have another public engagement process before they draft the final EIS. One of the factors that we've brought up throughout this process is the nearshore coral reef impacts from discharges. That's not something that the Corps has done very much with, and in fact, their modeling did not even include that footprint. And we offered some of our own data and analysis to do that, and it wasn't accepted at that time. So we will be making sure that that's adequately addressed in the EIS. If it's not, we'll be pointing that out. It may not have a large bearing on how this schedule turns out, but we're already thinking about the next schedule. This schedule is going to be in place for maybe up to 10 years, and things like the EAA reservoir and the EAA stormwater treatment area and other parts of the system have projects in SERP that are being built out will constitute a need to redo this schedule again, and at that time probably build more of a permanent schedule. 6 years from now, we will already probably be working on this, and you won't have your South County traffic light yet. That's how fast this thing comes around. Yes, sir.
So, the dike is figured into this, or it is not figured into this?
The dike is part of this, and that's the substantial reason for this massive Zone D, is that you now have the ability to use capacity in the lake that you weren't able to use under LORS 08. Absolutely. The things that were considered in this were the C44 reservoir, the C43 reservoir, and the Kissimmee River restoration along with the Herbert Hoover Dike. It's a nuance. The Herbert Hoover Dike did not really change performance measures. What it changed is risk ratings at different levels, so that you could tolerate higher risk, or you could tolerate higher levels that would produce lower risk. So we're going to stay engaged in this thing for the rest of next year, and it's really as much about setting us up for the next schedule as it is finishing out this one. So when's this going to be over, John? Next month we'll get the operational guidance, and that'll create kind of the final draft of the schedule. The EIS will be drafted by April or May. We'll have a period of public engagement. Then the final draft of the EIS, we would expect it in July or August. There'll be another public engagement process. And then towards the end of next year, there'll be a record of decision that memorializes LOSUM as our new schedule, and we'll begin operating at about a year from now under the new LOSUM schedule. With that, I have no other slides, but happy to answer any questions.
So, John, I would say this much as well. I think when you highlighted the performance of the team, I think you didn't add yourself into that performance level. I think you are a significant part of this process, and for that, I think we all appreciate your efforts and knowledge. Ed says this usually on someone when they're making a long presentation about how many times they look at their notes, and I don't remember you looking too many times at your notes. So the depth of knowledge, the wisdom and talent you bring to this is really great. I will add this in, and hopefully it doesn't bring a whole bunch of conversation. I hope next year that we can have the same kind of report with Palomar. I hope we assign the same kind of team effort to getting Palomar done as we've done with this, because what is significant in this effort is hiring and getting the team amassed that you need, and the rest of the staff need to make the arguments and make the things happen that we need to make happen. We did the same strategy with the railroad, and that proved to be helpful to us. And so I think we're getting good at this, and I just hope that as we take on these massive projects that have multiple different layers and pieces and moving parts, that we consider the same kind of strategies. So for at least from my end, on a funding side of all this, I'm supportive of continuing the effort and funding the appropriate strategies that make these things a success at the end for Martin County. So thank you. Commissioner Hurd.
Yeah, the restrictions on discharging water from Lake Okeechobee if there are harmful algal blooms present is interesting. So if that's the case, if that's a premise, then if discharges can't be made to the east and west, where can they go? And also, are releases into the lake restricted at that time?
Well, that would be a wonderful option.
Yes, it
if we
would.
had it. So what it means is they use more capacity in the lake.
But how much, John? You're talking about June, July, August. If it's a monster summer, and we know how fast the lake can go up. It can go up in 2 feet in 2 weeks if it's a really bad summer.
It's a bigger factor for the Caloosahatchee than it is for us. I mean, the reality is, if they were discharging 2,000 CFS to us, it would be a couple inches a month at most. And the Caloosahatchee has higher capacities, and so it's a few more inches, but the ability to discharge is not on the same scale as how much inflow comes into the lake. And so it really becomes about how much you have to release in the dry season to compensate for that, or not really how much, is how long. Because your capacities are kind of there, and so would you discharge for another 2 months or 2 weeks if you held it back? And it's a concern, and one of the things that we've talked about frequently. I mean, obviously, blue-green algae and toxic summers are what stir, the bulk of our constituents. We, as ecologists, are also concerned about oyster beds, seagrasses, nearshore coral reef, turbidity, and photosynthesis that impacts the ecology of the system and its ability to endure these things. And dry season releases impact all those things. And so we've always been saying that this is not a dry season versus wet season issue for us. It's all of that. It would be nice not to have toxic summers. I'm in that camp, but
Well, and we also never can forget that the reason that the South Florida Water Management District Governing Board was removed from office and a new one was seated the day after Governor DeSantis took office was because of harmful algal blooms, and that's why the task force was created, and that's why the state of Florida has emphasized the importance of this LOSUM. And so we need to remember that these were things that were done in response to the terrible conditions on both sides. And if we don't get the operating manual that we want from this, and I'm not satisfied with it, it won't be because we didn't try. I also want to echo my congratulations. This was just a phenomenal team. Best one we've ever put together. Thanks.
thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioners, anything else? John, excellent presentation, great work. And across the board, it's always interesting when you listen to other counties, when you're sitting in a group together, talk about their reactions to what exists. So we're making headway. It's great.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, to the best of my knowledge, we have reached the end of our agenda.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hurd, anything for the end of the day?
I have something when you're done with them.
Okay.
I just want to, usually, I don't have anything, but I do have something.
Okay, I'll work my way over to you. And
Okay.
Commissioner Hurd?
Nothing.
Commissioner Campy?
I'm all set.
I'm all set, thank you.
Commissioner Heatherington? Commissioner Jenkins? Again, tonight, 6 o'clock, downtown Jensen, Taste of Jensen, Christmas tree lighting.
Public comment, 5:05.
Oh, yeah, public comment. Public comment? Okay, come on up. And then I will come back to Ms. Krista.
Thank you. No rush.
Good
Afternoon. It's my understanding, because I've read it in the Florida Department of Transportation information, I will send it to you, I don't have it with me. The commissioners have the ability to make changes to things that they don't agree with. For example, if a road is considered a collector road, it can be changed to a neighborhood road by commission vote, which would allow decrease in speed. So when the engineers, and I'm not criticizing them, but when they tell you, well, you can't do that, it's a collector road, you can change the name of it to a neighborhood. So I want to just point out, and I will send it to everyone, the commissioners do have the ability to make changes to traffic, speeds, lights, etc. It just has to come from all of you. You have to make it happen. You don't have to go by every single thing that's in the Department of Transportation. Thank you.
And I, for fear of starting a conversation over this, I agree. One thing that we will be reminded of on a regular basis is that because of licensure and because of responsibility, we've done this once or twice, at least in my 20 years of doing this, where the commission has decided to sort of take it upon themselves to make a decision outside of the engineering department's recommendations, which means the liability falls on our shoulders versus their shoulders, which is rightfully so. Some of this stuff, though, with FDOT, when FDOT's involved, it's not a matter of us deciding we're just going to go ahead and do something, whether FDOT likes it or not. And I think more of my comments were about the FDOT right-of-ways and issues that we deal with them on, that we are penned into a box more than we'd like to be. But I don't disagree with you on local issues, that there's aren't plenty of things that we can do if we decide as a board to do them.
She didn't state her name for the record.
Do you want to come back up and state your name for the record? My shadow over here would like you to come
Your
up.
vice chair.
Would like you to come up and do that.
Amy Pritchett.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, not seeing anybody else in the audience. Ms. Krista?
Yes, so today, after your redistricting, what I would like is some staff direction for staff to begin the process of making your commission MSTU, your municipal service taxing unit boundaries to be consistent with your commission districts.
So, I'm just curious. I mean, and if there's separate action that needs to be taken, that's fine. But I would have assumed that when you change those boundaries, those become our district boundaries.
There's actually a process that we have to go through. There's an ordinance that was separately adopted to create those MSTU boundaries, and we go in and we modify those ordinances with the meets and bounds to be consistent with your commission districts. It's every 10 years, but
Well, I understand. I'm trying to understand. Fine.
We have to
from my
do it.
perspective, But I just, does the ordinance say that? Or does it say that it has to be consistent with the census tract data that we do every 10 years? And if it doesn't, what I would also recommend, if you're going to bring it back to us to modify them to make them coterminous, then I would add or ask, at least from my perspective, ask that we put language in there that when we do this, that automatically is a requirement that we modify them. Because why wouldn't you? I mean, why would you have different MSTU boundaries that you couldn't?
It's a matter of Florida statute, so because you happen to have a provision with an MSTU taxing district, but you've got to do it independently. You've got to jump through the MSTU requirements of Florida statute separately from the state requirements for what your representation districts are. It's apples and oranges. I agree with you that it would seem like you could, but the property appraiser, in order for her to do the assessment, has got to have a legal description separate in the ordinance that sets up the MSTU.
I get it, I hear you. But what seems silly is the action we just took was for the legal descriptions of the new districts to be defined for us to adopt, which would be what the tax collector would use to do the collections. It's not going to change. They're not going to change.
It's two different, the legal description is found in two different places.
But it's
So
the same-
one doesn't translate into the other,
But it would be the same exact legal description.
correct? But
we'll look at it. and
we'll
if
look at it, but
You bring us back next week at the same time, if it can be done in that amount of time. Stop.
we have to amend the ordinance.
That's what I'm asking. Can you-
But I have to advertise it. It takes 10 days to,
So you can't do that.
right,
Okay, so at the next available
yes.
commission
Yes.
meeting, can you bring back an ordinance change that reflects the same exact boundaries as the newly drawn boundaries
Correct,
that will be done by the surveyor for next Tuesday?
correct.
And you need a motion for that. Do you need direction for
I
that?
just need direction so that when we bring it back,
Sorry, just cool your jets.
that's all. I just didn't want to bring it
11
and
months,
then
you'll be able to sit here and do whatever you want, Ed. I promise.
I want to have it done now. I don't want to wait till next week.
we
can't
we
do it. You
can't,
gotta
we can't advertise. We have to advertise. It's a separate ordinance with each of the,
Got you.
yeah.
I don't either, but I get it. So, you all okay with that?
Sorry I brought it up.
No, it's fine. And if we didn't know and then it wouldn't happen and then somebody'd ask why in 3 months. So you can do that for the next appropriate agenda that we'll have that on.
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
Nope.
Ms. Woods? Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Commissioner Kemp, you had your light on when that was for that. We all set? All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.